Angel didn't scream. She didn't shake. While every customer in that restaurant dropped to the floor and begged for their lives, one waitress stood behind the counter with her tray still in her hand. Completely still, completely quiet, completely in control. And the man who walked in wearing a mask and ordering his crew around like they owned the night. He stopped mid-sentence. Because he knew that silence. He had heard it before, in a place neither of them was supposed to survive. This story will have you questioning every character from the very first line. Before we begin, tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications. New stories land every week, and you do not want to miss a single one. The robbery started at 8:47 on a Wednesday. Angel Osei, no wait. Angel Mandy, 24 years old. Originally from a coastal city in Côte d'Ivoire that smelled like salt and grilled fish, and the kind of poverty that teaches you to keep your face perfectly blank no matter what is happening behind your eyes. She had been in South Korea for 3 years. She spoke the language well enough to take orders, argue with the kitchen staff, and lie to her landlord about why rent was late. She wore the uniform, navy blue shirt, white apron, hair pulled back so tight it gave her a headache by noon every single day. She worked the floor at Cheongsam, a restaurant on a side street in a city that tourists never found on their maps. The restaurant served Korean African fusion food, an odd combination that somehow worked, the way most odd combinations do when someone stops caring what other people think. Angel had been carrying a tray of jollof-flavored tteokbokki to table 7 when the front door opened. 4 men, all masked and swerved fast. The first one fired a single shot into the ceiling, not to hurt anyone, just to make a point. Everyone understood the point immediately. Chairs scraped. Screams exploded. 12 customers collapsed to the floor like their legs had simply given up. Angel did not drop her tray. She set it down, carefully, on the counter nearest to her. She turned, slowly, evenly, and placed both hands flat on the surface where the customers could see them. Her face said, "I am not a threat." Her eyes said, "I am watching everything." The man at the front of the group, the one giving orders, swept his gaze across the room. He was tall. He wore all black. His mask covered everything from his nose down, and a cap was pulled low over his forehead. He spoke in rapid Korean, directing his crew to the back office where the restaurant's weekend cash was kept in a drop safe. "Nobody moves," he said in Korean, then repeated it in accented but clear English. "Nobody gets hurt." The cook from the back, a young man named Bongani, who was 17 and had no business being in this situation, had started crawling toward the side door. The masked leader noticed. "Stop," he said. "Quiet. Not loud. The kind of quiet that is more dangerous than shouting." Bongani stopped. And then, from behind the counter, Angel spoke. "He's just a kid." Her voice was flat and even. "Let him go out the side. He doesn't know where the safe is. He's not useful to you." The room went very still. Every masked man in the restaurant turned to look at her. Every customer on the floor held their breath. And the leader stood completely motionless. For 3 full seconds, he said nothing. His second in command, a shorter man with nervous eyes, took a step toward Angel. "Quiet. Leave her." The leader's voice came out strange. Not commanding. Not annoyed. Something else entirely. Something that didn't belong in a robbery. He was staring at Angel. Angel stared back. "The boy goes out the side," the leader said. Not to his crew. To her. Like he was answering her directly. "The rest of you don't move." Bongani scrambled out the side door. And in the strange, suspended silence that followed, the leader tilted his head, just slightly, and something in his posture shifted. Something that had nothing to do with the robbery and everything to do with recognition. He knew her. He didn't understand how. He didn't understand when. But that voice, that flat, unafraid, completely controlled voice, had lived somewhere in the back of his head for a long time. He just couldn't place it yet. His name was Dukyum Lim, 29 years old. Born in a small city in North Chungcheong province, a place most people drove through without stopping, a place that produced ceramic pottery and very few opportunities. He had left at 15 with a fake ID, 2 changes of clothes, and a stubbornness that had gotten him into trouble approximately 400 times since then. By 23, he was running operations for the Lim faction. Not the biggest crime organization in the country, but efficient, disciplined, and known for one specific rule: no innocent people get hurt. That rule had kept Dukyum sleeping at night, if barely. He wasn't here for the money in the safe. The restaurant job was a cover, A message being sent to the owner, a man named Mr. Huang, who owed a debt to someone much higher up the chain than Dukium. The robbery was theater. The point was that Mr. Huang would understand, tomorrow morning when he came in and found his office ransacked, that his time was running out. Dukium had done this kind of thing before. He had never once stopped mid-robbery because of a voice. He pushed it aside. He needed to focus. His crew had the safe open in the back. He could hear the familiar clunk of the mechanism. And in 4 minutes they would be out of here, and this night would be finished. Except, he kept looking at the waitress. She had not moved. She was still standing behind the counter with both hands flat on the surface. Her eyes tracked his crew without panic. The way someone tracks a problem they have already begun solving. There was something almost professional about it. Something that didn't belong on a waitress. Where have I heard that voice? The thought nagged him like a splinter he couldn't reach. His second-in-command, Teo, short for Teofil, a Korean-Polish man who had been with Dukium for 5 years and had opinions about everything, appeared at his elbow. "We're done. Time to go." Dukium nodded. He turned toward the door. And then, because he could not help it, because something in him that was separate from logic demanded it, he looked back at the waitress one more time. She was looking straight at him. Not scared. Not angry. Not even particularly curious. Just watching. Like she was memorizing him the same way he was memorizing her. Dukium walked out into the night. 3 blocks away, sitting in the back of a moving car with the mask finally off and the cold air hitting his face, he said one thing. "Find out who the waitress is." Teo, driving, glanced in the rearview mirror. "The African girl? Why? Just find out." Back in the restaurant, the police arrived 11 minutes after the robbers left. Angel gave her statement the same way she did everything. Clearly, efficiently, without unnecessary detail. She described what she had seen. She did not mention that the leader had answered her directly. She did not mention the 3 seconds of silence when he had recognized her voice. She was not sure why she left that out. Officer No, a tired woman with ink on her sleeve who had clearly been having a long week, looked up from her notepad. "You stayed very calm. Most people would have been terrified." "I was scared," Angel said simply. "You didn't look it." "I know." Officer No studied her for a moment longer than necessary. "Have you ever been in a situation like this before?" "No," Angel said. That was a lie. She walked home at 10:30 because the buses had stopped running and she didn't have enough on her transit card for a cab. The city was cool and half asleep. The street lights made everything orange. She kept her hands in her apron pockets and her footsteps even. She had been in this city for 3 years. She had built a careful, quiet, unremarkable life. She worked at Cheongsam 6 days a week. She studied Korean on Sundays. She sent money home every month to her younger sister, Lola, who was 14 and studying harder than anyone in their family ever had. She had one friend here, a woman named Precious Abra, who was Nigerian and worked at a convenience store 2 streets over, and who talked enough for both of them. She had no enemies that she knew of. She had tried very hard to have no enemies. She thought about the masked man. She thought about the 3 seconds of silence. She thought about the way he had said leave her, not as an order, but almost as a reflex. Like protecting her had been automatic. Impossible, she told herself. She had never met a Korean Mafia boss in her life. She had never been in Korea before 3 years ago. She had no reason to know anyone like that, and no reason for anyone like that to know her. She walked faster. Behind her, 2 streets back, a car idled at the curb for a moment, then drove away slowly, like it had already seen what it needed to see. The next morning, Angel went to work. This was partly because she needed the money, and partly because she refused, on principle, from somewhere deep in her chest, to let last night rearrange her routine. She had learned early that routines were armor. If you kept showing up to the same places at the same times, doing the same things, it was harder for chaos to find you. She pushed open the back door of Cheongsam at 9 a.m. to find the kitchen already buzzing with noise and opinions. Bongani was there, thank goodness, sitting on an overturned crate with a mug of tea, telling his version of last night's events to anyone who would stand still long enough to listen. His version involved significantly more running and significantly more heroics than Angel remembered. "You literally crawled," she said, tying her apron. "I strategically relocated," Bongani said with dignity. The head cook, a wide, warm woman named Ani Suk, who was Korean and had adopted approximately everyone who worked in her kitchen as personal family members, was chopping vegetables with the focused energy of someone who was very upset and expressing it through food preparation. "The safe," Anisuk said, without looking up from her knife. "They took the weekend cash. Mr. Huang is going to be unbearable for a week." "Did the police say anything useful?" Angel asked. "They said they're investigating." Anisuk said, investigating the way one might say nothing useful. Angel nodded and went to set up the floor. The morning passed quietly. Lunch came and went. She poured tea and cleared plates and smiled at the right moments and thought about absolutely nothing she wasn't supposed to think about. She was very good at not thinking about things. At 2 in the afternoon, a man she had never seen before sat down at table 3. He was Korean, maybe 30. He had a friendly face and a way of sitting that looked relaxed but wasn't the kind of practiced casual that people who are always working learn to perform. He ordered bibimbap and sparkling water and was extremely polite about it. Angel brought the order. As she set it down, he said, very casually, like he was commenting on the weather, "You handled yourself well last night." Angel's hand on the glass did not shake. "Thank you," she said, and turned to walk away. "Miss Mandy." She stopped. He knew her name. She had not told the police her full name last night, only her first name and her employee number. And she had definitely not told this man anything. She turned back slowly. "Can I help you?" The man smiled. It was a careful smile, like he had practiced it. "My employer would like to meet you. He believes you might know each other." "I don't know anyone," Angel said. "He said you'd say that." "A beat. He also said to tell you." The man paused, like he was relaying a memorized message. "That the last time he heard that voice, you were translating for a man named Adissa in a warehouse in Seoul. For years ago." The blood left Angel's face so quickly she felt it go. She was very careful to keep her expression blank. Seoul. For years ago. She had not been in Korea 4 years ago. She had been in Côte d'Ivoire. Except, for 6 weeks in January of that year, she hadn't been. She had been traveling with her uncle, who moved goods between ports, and there had been a stop that wasn't on any official itinerary, and a warehouse she had been told was for storage of textiles, and a man named Adissa who had needed someone who spoke both French and English to help him communicate with a Korean buyer. She had been 20 years old. She had needed the money. She had translated for 3 hours, and then left and told herself that she had not understood enough of what was being traded to be certain it was wrong. She had never spoken about that day to anyone. "Tell your employer," Angel said, her voice perfectly even, "that he has the wrong person." She walked back to the kitchen. She did not come out again until the man at table 3 had paid his bill and left. That night she called Precious. Not to explain, she never explained anything in full, but because she needed to hear a voice that was familiar and uncomplicated and connected to her actual life. "Someone came into the restaurant today," she said. "A man I don't know." "Okay." Precious, who had the instincts of someone who had grown up hearing what wasn't being said, went quiet. "How bad?" "I don't know yet." "Angel." Precious's voice dropped. "Are you in trouble?" "I'm always fine," Angel said. "That is not what I asked." A pause that stretched too long. "I'll tell you if it gets worse," Angel said. "You always say that, and then it gets worse, and you still don't tell me." "Precious." "I'm serious. You are my best friend, and you are made of stone, and one day you're going to be buried under it. I need to go to bed." "Angel Mandy." "Good night, Precious." She ended the call. She sat in her small apartment. One room, one window overlooking a wall, a photo of Lola on the nightstand, and she thought about Dukyum Lim. She didn't know his name yet, but she knew the shape of a leader when she saw one. She had grown up around men who moved like that, like the room bent around them. She knew what it meant when a man in that kind of position sent someone to find you instead of finding you himself. It meant he was being careful. The question was, careful about what? And the second question, the one she pressed down harder, was why, when she had heard his voice in that restaurant, something in her had gone completely quiet in a way it hadn't in years. She did not let herself explore that question. She turned off the light. Dukyum was standing at the window of his third-floor office in a building that, from the outside, looked like an ordinary printing company. Inside, it was the nerve center of every operation the Lim faction ran between here and the coast. He held a folder that Teo had placed on his desk 20 minutes ago. And the second question, the one she pressed down harder, was why, when she had heard his voice in that restaurant, something in her had gone completely quiet in a way it hadn't in years. She did not let herself explore that question. She turned off the light. Dukyum was standing at the window of his third-floor office in a building that, from the outside, looked like an ordinary printing company. Inside, it was the nerve center of every operation the Lim faction ran between here and the coast. He held a folder that Teo had placed on his desk 20 minutes ago. The folder contained everything Teo had found on Angel Mandy. It was not much. She was clean. Legally clean, anyway. Working visa in order, taxes paid, no criminal record. 3 years at Cheongsam. Sending regular remittances to a family in Côte d'Ivoire. One friend, a precious Abra who herself was straightforwardly law-abiding. But Seoul. The name of the warehouse in the report she had signed when she arrived in Korea, buried in the immigration notes under purpose of prior visits. Listed a 2-month stay 4 years ago on a student exchange program that Dukyum was fairly certain had not been a student exchange program. He remembered Seoul. He remembered the warehouse. He had been there, 25 years old, running his first independent job for the faction. A trade negotiation that had gone sideways when the middleman couldn't communicate and brought in a young woman, barely out of her teens, to translate. He hadn't been in the room for all of it. He had been in and out, managing the perimeter. But he had heard her voice through the door. That flat, careful, controlled voice giving French to Korean to English and back again without missing a beat. And then she had left, and the deal had collapsed anyway, and Dukyum had spent the following 6 months putting out fires. He had never expected to hear that voice again. He closed the folder. She denied it, Teo said from the corner, where he was eating convenience store ramen directly from the cup because he had no concept of professional atmosphere. I know. So she's either scared or she doesn't remember you. She remembers, Dukyum said. She went quiet when you mentioned Seoul. How did you? She didn't say anything to 1J. I know. He turned from the window. That was the point. She didn't say anything. She heard Seoul and said nothing and walked away instead of asking how he knew. That means she already knew what Seoul was. Teo pointed at him with a chopstick. Or she's just very unreadable. Both, Dukyum said. Find me a reason to put her in the same room as me without it looking like I'm threatening her. And if there isn't one, then make one. The reason appeared 2 days later without anyone having to make it. Mr. Huang, the owner of Cheongsam, whose debt to Dukyum's employers had not been resolved by the robbery as message, made a decision that would alter approximately 6 people's lives in ways he did not intend. He hired a new manager. The new manager's name was Huang Chi. He was half Japanese, half Korean, 27, and almost aggressively charming. The kind of person who walked into rooms and immediately made everyone feel both welcome and slightly observed. He had come with a letter of recommendation from a business contact of Mr. Huang's excellent organizational skills, and as Angel clocked in her first minute of working with him, absolutely no interest in actually managing a restaurant. He watched the floor. He made notes. He asked specific questions about delivery schedules and which suppliers came in through the back and what the layout of the storage room was. None of those were restaurant management questions. He's gathering information, Angel told Auntie Suk quietly, during the afternoon lull. Auntie Suk, who had been running kitchens for 30 years and had developed a finely tuned radar for anyone who was trouble, glanced through the serving window at Huang, who was chatting warmly with a delivery man. For who? I don't know yet. Should I be worried? Angel thought about it honestly. Yes, but not today. Auntie Suk went back to her prep. I will put more garlic in everything. That always helps me. By Thursday, Huang had begun to pay particular attention to Angel. Not romantic attention, something more purposeful than that. He positioned himself near her station. He showed up at the same break times. He made conversation easily and listened more than he talked, which she recognized as a technique. He was good at it. She was better. You've been here 3 years, he said on Thursday afternoon, leaning against the counter while she counted her table's orders. You speak Korean well. Thank you. French too, right? I heard you on the phone. She looked up. You were listening to my phone calls? The kitchen isn't very soundproof, he said, not apologetically. She held his gaze for a moment. He smiled. It was a genuinely warm smile. She noted that he was actually someone it would be easy to like if you weren't paying attention. He had a gift for making himself feel safe. Is there something you need help with? She asked. Maybe, he said. I'm actually looking for someone to help me with some translation work. Outside of restaurant hours. It pays well. I already have a job. This would be an addition. He paused. French to Korean. Technical material. A few meetings. She set down her notepad. She looked at him with the same expression she had used on the robbers 4 days ago. Not aggressive, not afraid. Just entirely present and entirely unreadable. "I'll think about it," she said. She had no intention of thinking about it. She had every intention of finding out who had sent him. That evening, Angel did something she hadn't done in a long time. She called her uncle. Uncle Mickey, her mother's older brother, who had taught her that the world had more layers than most people could see, and who had brought her to Seoul 4 years ago without explaining why, and who she had not spoken to since she left for Korea, picked up on the third ring. "Angel." His voice was the same. Low, careful, with the particular warmth of someone who loved you and was also slightly afraid of what you might know. "Who is Huang Chi?" she asked. A long pause. "Where did you hear that name?" "He's my new manager." The sound her uncle made was not a word. It was the sound of a man recalculating very quickly. "Angel, listen to me. Whatever he has offered you, don't take it. I know that. I want to know who he works for. That is information you don't want." "Uncle Mickey." Her voice was still flat, still even. But underneath it, something tightened. "You brought me to that warehouse. You put me in a room with people and didn't tell me what they were trading. I translated because you needed me to. And now, for years later, those same people, or people connected to them, are standing in my restaurant. Do you understand that I need to know who they are?" Another pause. "There are two sides," he said finally. "One side wants what you know. The other side wants to make sure you never say it. I don't know anything. I translated 3 hours of shipping terms." "You translated the terms of a trade route," her uncle said quietly. "A route that someone paid a great deal of money to keep secret. A route that is currently the subject of a very serious disagreement between two very serious organizations." Angel was quiet. "Which side is Huang Chi on?" she asked. "The one that is currently losing," Uncle Mickey said. She processed that. "And the man who sent someone to my restaurant on Monday? The one who knows about Seoul?" Her uncle took a long breath. "That one," he said slowly, "is the side that is currently winning. And Angel, if he knows where you are, he does know where I am. Then you need to decide very quickly whether to run or to trust him. Because there is no middle option." She thought about 3 seconds of silence in a restaurant. A man in a mask saying leave her like a reflex. A folder of information that someone had gathered not to threaten her with, but to understand her. "How would I know if I could trust him?" she asked. "You'd know," Uncle Mickey said. "People like that, the real ones, they don't hide what they are. They're too proud." She thanked him. She ended the call. She sat very still in her apartment for a long time. Then she took out a piece of paper and wrote down a single sentence. She folded it. She put it in her apron pocket. Tomorrow, if Huang Chi approached her again, she would give it to him. Not as an answer. As a message. For whoever was actually asking. The next morning, Huang was there again. Mid-morning, he appeared at her elbow while she was restocking napkins. "Have you thought about my offer?" She pulled the folded paper from her pocket and held it out. He took it, opened it, read it. Whatever he had been expecting, it wasn't this. The warmth in his face flickered, just for a moment, into something more serious. The note said, "Tell him I remember Seoul. Tell him if he wants to talk, he knows where I work. I'm not running." Huang folded the paper carefully and put it in his jacket. "I'll pass it along," he said. His voice had changed, still pleasant, but the performance had dropped a layer. "Do you know what you're doing?" "No," Angel said honestly. "But I know what I'm not doing." He nodded once. Then he went back to pretending to manage the restaurant. Angel went back to work. 2 hours later, her phone lit up with a message from a number she didn't recognize. It said, "Tonight, 7 p.m., the tea house on Sukgingaro. Come alone. I'll be in the back." She stared at it for a moment. She typed back, "How will I know it's you?" The reply came in under 30 seconds. "You'll know." She arrived at the tea house at 6:58. It was a small place, old-fashioned, with wooden screens between the tables and tea that came in clay pots. The kind of place that was designed for quiet conversations. She was shown to the back by a staff member who seemed to be expecting her, which told her that Dukyum. She still didn't know his name, but she thought of him as the leader, had arranged this carefully. He was already seated. No mask this time. No cap. Just a man in a plain dark jacket, sitting with his hands around a cup of tea, looking at her across the table with an expression that was simultaneously very calm and very focused, like she was a problem he had been working on and had not yet solved. He was younger than she had imagined from his voice. Sharp features. A scar along his left jaw that was old enough to be faded, but recent enough to still have a story. Eyes that did what her eyes did, catalogued and assessed without performing the act of looking. She sat down. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said in Korean, which she answered in kind, "You're not scared." "Should I be? Most people would be." "I'm not most people." Something shifted slightly in his expression. Not a smile, not quite. More like the acknowledgement of a point well made. "No," he said. "You're not." He poured her tea without asking. She noted that as a social calculation, making himself host in a neutral space, not aggressive, not dominant, just taking reasonable initiative. "My name is Dukyum," he said. "Angel," she said. I know you know." A pause. "Seoul," he said. "Seoul," she agreed. "You were translating for Odessa. French to Korean. You were 20. 20 and a half, she said. And I didn't know what I was translating for." "I believe you," he said immediately. No hesitation. She had not expected that. She kept her face still. "Why?" "Because if you had known, you would have either taken money to stay quiet or you would have talked. You did neither. You disappeared." He turned his cup slowly. "The people who hired Odessa spent 2 years trying to find the French translator from that meeting. They thought you were a loose end. And what do you think? I think you were a 20-year-old who needed money and stumbled into something that had nothing to do with you." He looked at her directly. "I also think you are considerably more capable than a 20-year-old who just needed money." She didn't answer that. "The route that was traded in that warehouse," Dukyum continued, "is now being used for something my organization did not agree to. Someone expanded its use, without authorization. The people above me need to know the original terms. The exact shipping coordinates, the specific handoff language." He paused. "It was translated. By you." She understood now. All of it suddenly landing into place. "You don't need me because I know something," she said slowly. "You need me because I'm the only one who heard the exact wording. In both languages," he confirmed. "I'm not a perfect memory recorder. You translated for 3 hours and reproduced it in 2 languages simultaneously. Your memory is excellent." He said it without flattery. Just as a fact. She stared at him. He stared back. "And Huang Chi?" she asked. Dukyum's jaw tightened slightly, the only real crack in his composure. "He's working for the people who expanded the route. They sent him to get you before I could." "Get me how?" "Either recruit you or—" He stopped. He didn't finish that sentence. He didn't need to. Angel looked at the tea in her cup. She thought about Lola, 14 years old and studying. She thought about 3 years of careful, quiet life. She thought about what it meant to be the only person in the world who had heard something in 2 languages that 2 powerful organizations needed to reconstruct. She thought about the fact that this man had told his crew to let a child leave through a side door during a robbery. "If I help you," she said, "what happens to me after? You get to go back to your life." "That's not a guarantee." "No," he said. "It's not." Another pause. "I don't lie to people about what I can promise. It's a waste of everyone's time." She looked up at him. "And what do you want?" she asked. Not aggressively. Genuinely. "Not your organization. You." He was quiet for a moment that felt longer than it was. "I want the people who expanded that route to answer for it," he said. "What they're moving now, it's not what this organization was built to do. There are lines. They crossed one." He met her eyes. "I want those lines back." It was a strange thing, to sit across from a crime lord in a tea house and find yourself believing him. Not blindly, but proportionally. In the way you believe someone who is telling you a complicated truth rather than a simple lie. "I need 3 days to think," she said. "You have 1, he said. Not unkindly. "Huang won't wait 3. She stood. He stood too. They faced each other across the small table in the back of a tea house that smelled like roasted barley and old wood. And something passed between them that was not words and not a plan and not, precisely, trust, but was the shape of the space where trust could eventually fit. "One day," she said. "One day," he agreed. She left. He sat back down and looked at his tea for a long time. Teo, who had been sitting 3 tables away disguised as a businessman reading a newspaper, appeared at his side. "So," Teo said. Dukyum said nothing for a moment. "She's going to say yes," he said finally. "How do you know?" "Because she already has," he said. "She just needs to let herself know it." She said yes the next morning. She sent 1 message, "I'm in. But I have conditions." He replied, "Name them." She typed, "Bongani and Precious stay out of this entirely." Anisuk too. If anything happens to them because of me, the deal is off, and I will find a way to make your life extremely inconvenient. A pause. Then agreed. Then, you're protective of the people around you. She almost didn't reply. Then aren't you? A longer pause. Yes, he replied. That's how I know you're serious. The meeting was set for 3 days later. A backroom gathering at a warehouse near the industrial port, where Dukyum's organization would put forward the original trade terms and challenge the expanded operation in front of a neutral party. A council of senior figures who handled organizational disputes. For 3 days, Angel reviewed everything she remembered. It came back in pieces, not perfect, but structured. She had always had a mind like a filing cabinet. Numbers, phrases, directional terms. She reconstructed the core of what she had translated that night in Seoul and passed it to Dukyum in encrypted notes that Teo delivered in person. For 3 days, she went to work at Cheongsam like nothing had changed. And Huang Chi watched her. She could feel it. He was no longer pretending to be warm. The performance had shifted into something more watchful, more edged. On the second day, he cornered her in the supply room. You're working with him, Huang said. Not a question. I don't know what you're talking about, Angel said. You sent him a note. Through me. Huang's voice was still pleasant. That was the most unnerving thing about him, that his voice never matched what was in his eyes. That was either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both, she said. He can't protect you. Huang stepped closer. Not threatening exactly, but deliberately closing the distance. The council meeting, if it goes the way he wants, certain people will be very unhappy. And when powerful people are unhappy, they look for someone to blame. Someone small. Someone expendable. She felt the word expendable the way you feel a cold draft under a closed door. Are you trying to scare me? She asked. I'm trying to inform you, he said. There's a difference. And what would the alternative look like? She asked. If I stopped working with him. Huang tilted his head. We'd make sure you were protected. Given a new identity. Set up somewhere safe. Your family too. She thought about Lola. She thought about it for a real, honest, frightening second. And then she thought about what Uncle Mickey had said. The side that is currently losing. And about what Huang had just described as the prize. Being set up, relocated, owned. A life that belonged to the people who built the cage. No thank you, she said quietly. She walked out of the supply room. Huang let her go. That evening, she messaged Dukyum. Huang tried to recruit me today. He mentioned the council meeting. He knows. Dukyum's reply came in 40 seconds. I know. We move up the timeline. Tomorrow night. Her hands, finally for the first time in all of this, went slightly cold. Tomorrow, she thought. She put the phone down. She picked up the photo of Lola from the nightstand. I'm going to be fine, she said to the photo. The photo did not respond. She went to sleep. The warehouse near the industrial port looked, from the outside, exactly like what it claimed to be. A storage facility for shipping containers, half-lit, surrounded by the sound of machinery and the distant horn of cargo vessels. Inside was a different story. The neutral council had sent 3 representatives, older men with the stillness of people who had seen enough to stop being surprised by any of it. Dukyum's side occupied one end of a long table. The opposing faction, the ones who had expanded the route, occupied the other end. Their lead representative was a man named Duwan, who was 60 and had built his position over 3 decades of very careful alliances, and was currently looking at Angel like she was a variable he had not accounted for. Angel stood to Dukyum's left. Teo stood to his right. She had worn her work clothes because she had come directly from Cheongsam, and because she had decided she was not going to dress differently for this than for anything else. She was who she was. That was the point. The session began. Dukyum laid out the case methodically. The original trade terms, the agreed parameters, the subsequent unauthorized expansion. He was precise and unemotional, the way someone is when they have rehearsed a thing until it lives inside their breathing. Duwan countered. His argument was that the route had been adapted in response to changing conditions, that the original terms were never meant to be permanently binding, that the expansion was a natural evolution of the agreement. The council asked for the original wording. Dukyum said, "We have a witness to the original negotiation." Duwan went very still. Every eye in the room turned to Angel. She stepped forward. She stood in the center of the warehouse floor under a single overhead light, and she spoke, first in Korean, then in French, Then, in the hybrid shorthand that the original negotiation had used, the terms, the coordinates, the specific language of restriction that had been agreed upon. Word by word. Phrase by phrase. The way it had existed in that room in Seoul on a cold January night 4 years ago, when she had been 20 years old and needed money, and had not yet understood what she was walking into. She did not shake. She did not rush. She spoke as clearly and evenly as she had in the restaurant during the robbery, as she had in the tea house, as she had in every moment of her life when the situation demanded the best and most controlled version of herself. When she finished, the warehouse was completely silent. One of the council members, the eldest, a man who had not spoken yet, turned to Do-won. The restriction language is unambiguous, the elder said. The expansion violated the original terms. Do-won's face did not move, but his hand on the table curled slowly into a fist. This woman's memory is not a legal document, Do-won said. His voice was still steady, but underneath it was something that Angel recognized, the particular cold of someone calculating damage control. No, Do-kyum said, but it's the only record that exists, because someone made sure the written record disappeared. He looked directly at Do-won. The council can draw their own conclusions about why. The room erupted. Not in shouting, nothing as uncontrolled as that. In the particular eruption of a closed room full of powerful people suddenly recalculating positions and allegiances at speed. Conversations broke out in undertones. Council members turned to each other. Do-kyum's people remained still. Do-won's people began leaning close to their leader. Angel took a step back. She had done what she came to do. She found Do-kyum looking at her from across the room, not with relief, not with triumph, with something quieter than both of those. Something that was, if she was reading it correctly, gratitude that had no idea how to present itself. She gave him a small, single nod. He gave her one back. And then everything happened at once. The side door of the warehouse opened. Not quietly, with force, with intention. For figures entered from the left. Huang Chi was the last one through the door. He looked straight at Angel. Smart, he said, not loudly. I didn't think you'd actually show up. Do-kyum moved. Not toward Huang, but in front of Angel. Not dramatically. Just in the way that a person places themselves between a threat and something they intend to protect. Angel noticed. She filed it away. Chi, said one of the council members, with the tone of a man who was genuinely tired of people interrupting proceedings. This is a closed session. This session is about to be moot, Huang said. He was holding a document, printed, sealed. We have a filing with the upper council. A procedural challenge. The testimony of an uncertified witness cannot be accepted without corroboration. A collective pause. The eldest council member looked at the document. He looked at Huang. He looked at Do-kyum. Is the corroboration available? He asked. Do-kyum didn't hesitate. Yes. Huang's confident expression wavered, just slightly. He hadn't expected that. Then present it, the elder said. Do-kyum turned. And to everyone's absolute surprise, including, for one genuine half-second, Angel's, Teo stepped forward and placed a folder on the table. Angel looked at Do-kyum. You had corroboration the entire time? She asked quietly. Just for him to hear. We found a secondary record last week, he said, equally quiet. A backup ledger that one of Do-won's own people kept, for insurance. They were afraid of him too. Then why did you need me? He looked at her steadily. The ledger needed context. Numbers don't speak. The terms needed a voice. She absorbed that. You could have told me, she said. If I had told you we had the ledger, he said, you might not have agreed to come. You'd have thought you weren't necessary. She stared at him. That is, she started. Calculated, he said. Yes. I know. I'm sorry. She looked at the table. At the folder. At the council members examining the ledger with the focused attention of people who were clearly finding it very useful. Do-won was now speaking rapidly to Huang in low tones. Huang no longer looked confident. The procedural challenge had not landed the way they'd planned. The ledger blew it apart. Your people are about to have a very bad evening, Angel said. Yes, Do-kyum said. And mine. Yours are about to go home, he said. Bongani precious Ani Suk. None of this reaches them. I keep my agreements. She nodded slowly. And me? She asked. He turned to face her fully. That depends on what you want. She thought about it, not for long, because she had actually been thinking about it for days, in the careful quiet of her apartment and her routine and her very deliberate, very constructed life. I want to go back to Cheongsam, she said. I want to pour tea and carry trays and listen to Bongani tell inaccurate stories about his own bravery. I want to send money home to my sister. I want to live in my one-room apartment and not be relevant to any organization or faction or route or dispute ever again. Dukyum was quiet for a moment. That is a very specific and reasonable list, he said. I know what I want, she said. I know you do. He paused. What if some of that could happen, and also you occasionally had tea with someone who found you professionally and personally to be the most interesting person they had encountered in a very long time? She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them was the type to perform emotion. She was realizing both the problem and the specific comfort of this particular situation. They spoke the same language, the one that lived underneath words. Tea, she said carefully. That's all you're proposing. To start, he said. There was a warmth in his voice that hadn't been there before, still careful, still measured, but real. I find that everything worth having starts with something small. She almost smiled. She didn't, not quite. But the space around her expression shifted. I'll think about it, she said. You'll say yes, he said. You're very confident. You're still here, he said. When you could have left. The council session concluded 40 minutes later. Duwan's challenge was dismissed. The expanded route was declared in violation of the original terms. The consequences, bureaucratic, organizational, far above Angel's grade of concern, would unfold over the following weeks in rooms she would never enter and decisions she would never be informed of. Huang Qi left the warehouse without looking at her. She noted that as well. Not malice, just the particular quiet of someone who had lost a round and was already planning the next. She would not forget that. She would not assume this was finished. But for tonight it was finished. Teo drove her home. Dukyum rode in the front. Nobody spoke much, which suited all three of them. The city passed outside the window, lit signs and late walkers, and the particular orange of streetlights that Angel had come to think of as the color of her Korean life. When she got out in front of her building, Dukyum stepped out too. You don't have to walk me up, she said. I know, he said. He stayed by the car. She looked at him. He looked at her. There's a good tea house 2 streets from here, she said finally. Saturday mornings. They open at 8. I know that tea house, he said. Of course you do. Saturday, he said. 8. She turned and walked to her door. She did not look back, because she didn't need to. She knew he was watching, the same way she had known he was watching in the restaurant when she was the only person in the room still standing. She took the stairs. She unlocked her door. She stepped inside. She picked up the photo of Lola. Still fine, she said. She put it down. She made tea. She sat at her small table by her one window overlooking a wall. And for the first time in a very long time, maybe since Seoul, maybe since before that, she felt the particular and unusual peace of a person who had stood completely still during the worst of it and come out the other side not because nothing had touched her, but because she had decided what she was made of long before anyone had thought to test it. 3 streets away, Dukyum sat in the parked car for longer than necessary. Teo, to his credit, said nothing. Then, so she's going to have tea with you on Saturday. Yes. The woman who calmly held a tray while we robbed her restaurant, who translated a 4-year-old memory from 2 languages under pressure in front of a council, who turned down an offer from the opposing faction while being physically cornered in a supply room. Yes, is going to have tea with you. Teo, I'm just making sure I understand the situation. You understand the situation. Teo started the car. For what it's worth, he said, pulling out into the street, I think she's the right kind of trouble. Dukyum looked out the window. I know, he said. 4 days later, on Saturday at 8:02, Angel arrived at the tea house on Noryangpong-aro. Dukyum was already there. He had 2 cups waiting. She sat down. Neither of them spoke immediately, and that was fine because they had both learned, at different points in their very different lives, that the most honest thing 2 people can give each other is the willingness to be in the same silence without needing to fill it. The tea was good. The morning was cool and blue outside the window. The first Saturday became a second Saturday. Nobody planned it that way, or maybe they both did, separately, without admitting it. What happened was that the tea ran out and neither of them left, and the owner of the tea house on Noryangpong-aro, a compact, cheerful man named Mr. Yun, who had been running the place for 22 years and had seen approximately everything, brought a second pot without being asked and gave Dukyum a look that said finally, a person worth sitting still for. They talked for 2 hours. Not about Seoul. Not about the council or Duan or routes or organizations. They talked about small things, the kind of small things that are actually enormous when you examine them. The way Haley had learned Korean mostly from subtitle errors in variety shows, which had given her an oddly formal vocabulary for comedic situations. The fact that Do Kyum had wanted to be a ceramicist at 13 because his grandfather had worked with clay and made it look like a conversation with the earth, before life pointed him in a different direction entirely. Haley's sister Lola, who was currently top of her class and had an opinion about every subject and was going to either lead a country or argue with every leader of every country, depending on the day. Do Kyum laughed at that, a real laugh, the unguarded kind that arrived before the person can decide whether to let it. It surprised them both. Haley looked at him with something that was not quite a smile and not quite satisfaction. Something in between. "You don't do that often," she said. "What? That?" She gestured vaguely at his face. He understood what she meant. He didn't deny it. "No," he said. "Not for a while." "It's a good laugh," she said very matter-of-factly, the way she said everything. He looked at his teacup. "You are very direct," he said. "Is that a problem?" "No," he said. It's not a problem at all." The second Saturday, Teo drove Do Kyum to the tea house and made absolutely no comment about it, which was more noticeable than if he had said something. Do Kyum told him to go find something else to do for 2 hours. Teo went and sat in a bakery around the corner and sent Do Kyum photographs of pastries with no accompanying text, which was his way of expressing emotions he considered too large to name. That Saturday, Precious came with Haley. Not by design. Precious had appeared at Haley's apartment at 7:45 with the specific energy of someone who had been told nothing and intended to know everything. She was tall, warm, extravagantly expressive, and had the particular gift of making any room she entered feel like a gathering. "I am not spying," she announced, sitting down across from Do Kyum with a completely unapologetic expression. "I am meeting the man who has put a look on my best friend's face that I have not seen in the 3 years I have known her." Do Kyum looked at Haley. Haley looked at the ceiling. "What look?" Do Kyum asked Precious. "The look," Precious said, pouring herself tea without asking, "of a person who is thinking about someone when they think no one is watching." "Precious," Haley began. "I am simply providing context," Precious said serenely. Do Kyum looked back at Haley. Haley met his eyes with an expression of profound composure that was entirely contradicted by the fact that she was gripping her teacup slightly harder than necessary. "For what it's worth," Do Kyum said, with the particular careful gravity of someone choosing words like they are choosing their steps on uncertain ground. "I have the same look. According to Teo, who I did not ask." A beat. Precious let out a sound of pure delight that made Mr. Yun look over from behind the counter and smile. Haley said nothing, but she set her cup down, and the grip on it was lighter. The week after that, Do Kyum came to Cheongsam for lunch. He arrived without announcement, sat down at table 4, and ordered the jollof-flavored tteokbokki, which Haley noted with a private flicker of amusement was the dish she had been carrying when the robbery happened. Auntie Suk, who had been told only that a guest was coming and not who, looked through the serving window and then looked at Haley with an expression that communicated an entire conversation. Haley shook her head once. Auntie Suk communicated that the headshake was unconvincing. Bongani, who noticed everything and had the self-preservation instincts of someone who had crawled out of a robbery and felt he had earned a certain liberty, appeared at Haley's elbow. "That's the tea house man, isn't it? How do you know about the tea house?" Haley asked. "Precious told me." "Precious," she exhaled. "Go do something useful." "I am doing something useful," Bongani said, deeply sincere. "I am observing human connection in real time. It is educational." She handed him a tray of side dishes and pointed at table 9. He went, but he looked back twice. Haley walked to table 4 with her notepad, the way she walked to every table, evenly, efficiently, without performance. She stopped beside Do Kyum. "Is it good?" she asked, nodding at the tteokbokki. "It's very good," he said. He looked up at her. "Better than I expected." She wrote nothing on the notepad because he had already ordered. She stood there for a moment longer than was strictly professional. "My shift ends at 4, she said. "I know," he said. "There's a market 2 streets over on Friday afternoons. Vegetables and rice cakes and a man who argues with everyone about the correct way to salt fish." "That sounds. It's actually very entertaining," she said. He looked at her steadily. "Friday afternoon." "Friday afternoon," she agreed. She walked back to the kitchen. Through the serving window, she could see Dukyum looking down at his food with that particular expression. The one she was beginning to understand was him being happy and not quite knowing where to put it. Anisuk appeared beside her. "That young man," she said quietly, "has the face of someone who has been eating alone for a long time." Haley said nothing. "It is good," Anisuk said simply, "when people stop eating alone." She went back to her stove. Haley looked through the window for one more second. Then she went back to work. Friday came with a sky the color of pale jade and a wind that smelled like coming rain. The market was exactly as described, crowded and loud and full of the particular joy of ordinary things arranged in abundance. Dried peppers hung in ropes. Vendors called over each other. The fish salting man, whose name, Dukyum learned, was Mr. Pei, was in the middle of a dispute with a woman over the definition of properly rinsed that had clearly been ongoing for years and showed no sign of resolution. Haley stopped to watch it with the same absorbed focus she gave everything. "Does he ever win?" Dukyum asked. "No," she said. "But he makes excellent points." They walked the stalls slowly. She bought a bag of rice flour and 2 bundles of spring onions and spent 4 minutes debating the price of dried mushrooms with a vendor who was very impressed with her Korean and escalated his stubbornness accordingly. Dukyum watched her negotiate. Friday came with a sky the color of pale jade and a wind that smelled like coming rain. The market was exactly as described, crowded and loud and full of the particular joy of ordinary things arranged in abundance. Dried peppers hung in ropes. Vendors called over each other. The fish salting man, whose name, Dukyum learned, was Mr. Pei, was in the middle of a dispute with a woman over the definition of properly rinsed that had clearly been ongoing for years and showed no sign of resolution. Haley stopped to watch it with the same absorbed focus she gave everything. "Does he ever win?" Dukyum asked. "No," she said. "But he makes excellent points." They walked the stalls slowly. She bought a bag of rice flour and 2 bundles of spring onions and spent 4 minutes debating the price of dried mushrooms with a vendor who was very impressed with her Korean and escalated his stubbornness accordingly. Dukyum watched her negotiate. He had been slowly arriving at this understanding over several Saturdays and one lunch, and now a Friday market, unlike anyone he had spent time with. Not because she was extraordinary in the way of people who perform their extraordinariness, but because she was entirely, completely, stubbornly herself in every situation without apparent effort. She did not adjust herself for rooms. Rooms adjusted for her, quietly, without her seeming to notice or care. He had spent so much of his adult life calculating. Who was watching what move came next, what the exit was, what the cost of every choice was. It was exhausting in the way that breathing through a wall is exhausting. It kept you alive but consumed everything. Around her, he noticed the calculation quieted. Not disappeared. He was not naive enough to expect that. But quieted, the way noise goes down when you step into a room that is properly built. "You're staring," Haley said, without looking up from the mushrooms. "I know," he said. She glanced at him sideways. "Well, I was thinking," he said, "that this is the best Friday I have had in a long time." She looked at him fully then. The vendor, sensing a shift in attention, sighed loudly and gave her the mushrooms at her price. "For me too," she said. "Simple. No decoration. Just true." 3 weeks later, Lola called. It was a Sunday, which was Haley's Korean study day, and she was sitting with her textbooks and a bowl of the ndol-inspired stew she made once a week, a recipe from memory, from their mother's kitchen, the smell of which could fold time in half. Lola's face appeared on the screen. 14 years old, bright-eyed, with the look of someone who had just learned something and could not contain it. "You sound different," Lola said, before anything. "Hello to you too," Haley said. "No, I mean it, your voice. When you called last week. Something is different." Lola leaned closer to the camera with the investigative energy of a journalist who had not yet learned to be subtle. "Is there someone?" "I'm studying Korean grammar." "Haley." "Lola." "There is someone." Haley looked at her sister, 14 years old and already seeing everything, and felt something loosen in her chest. Something she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "There might be someone," she said. Lola made a sound that rattled the speaker. "Is he kind?" Lola demanded when she had recovered. "Yes," Haley said, and found she meant it without qualification. "Is he funny?" "Not on purpose." "Which makes it funnier." "Does he look at you like you're interesting?" Haley paused. "How do you know to ask that?" "Because you're the most interesting person I know," Lola said, with the absolute certainty of someone who has never doubted this for a second. And the right person will know that. Haley was quiet for a moment. He looks at me, she said carefully, like I'm a problem he's very glad to have. Lola considered this. That's a yes, she decided. I approve. You haven't met him. I will, Lola said, with the confidence of someone who had already decided this was settled. Tell him my sister does not accept anything less than full effort. I will absolutely not tell him that. Then I'll tell him myself when I visit. You're not, Haley started. I'm saving up, Lola said cheerfully. I have a plan. Also, I want to try the tteokbokki. Bye. The call ended. Haley sat with her textbooks and her stew and the sound of Lola's certainty still in the air. She picked up her phone. She sent one message to Dukyum. My sister has decided she approves of you. His reply came in under a minute. She hasn't met me. I told her that. What did she say? Haley smiled, actually smiled, the full kind that she rarely let into the open air. She said she will when she visits. A pause. Then I'll make sure to be worth approving of, he sent back. You already are, she typed. She looked at the message for a moment. She sent it. She went back to her grammar textbook. Outside, the Sunday city moved at its slow, comfortable pace. Vendors closing up, families heading home, the particular exhale of a day that had been ordinary and good. Inside her one-room apartment with its one window and its photo of Lola and its smell of stew that tasted like memory, Haley Mandy, who had survived a warehouse in Seoul and a robbery at Cheongsam and 4 years of careful quiet and one very significant week of not running when she probably should have, felt the specific, unhurried warmth of a life that had, without announcing itself, become genuinely hers. Not perfect. Not without its complications. Duwon was still out there, and Huang Chi's silence was the kind that thought ahead, and the world did not reorganize itself into safety just because two people chose each other across a tea house table. But the complications were real, and the warmth was also real, and she had decided. Somewhere between the fish-salting man at the market and Lola's 14-year-old certainty and Dukyum's laugh that arrived before he could stop it, that she was done building her life around avoiding things. She was going to build it around choosing things instead. Starting with Saturday mornings. Starting with tea. Starting with the particular and ordinary miracle of two people who had found each other in the wreckage of something difficult and decided, without fanfare, to try. 2 streets away, in the tea house on Noryang Pongaro, Mr. Yun was closing up for the night. He wiped down the table in the back, the one where a young man and a young woman sat most Saturday mornings, and he hummed to himself the way he always did at the end of a good day. He had been running this tea house for 22 years. He had seen people fall in love in the back corner approximately. He had counted, once, 11 times. This was, he had decided, number 12. And it had the particular quality of the best ones. The ones built not on fireworks but on the quiet bravery of two people who had every reason to stay closed and chose to open anyway. He turned off the lights. The tea house settled into its nighttime self. Outside, the city kept going, warm and lit and full of ordinary people living ordinary, extraordinary lives. And in one room, and in one car, and in one memory of a market on a jade-colored Friday, something patient and real and entirely unhurried continued growing in the direction of the light. Haley stayed calm when the world told her to panic, and that calm built something no robbery, no council meeting, and no opposing faction could take apart. This story is proof that the most powerful thing a person can carry is knowing exactly who they are. Subscribe now and share this with someone who needs to be reminded of that today. The next story is already waiting for you.